Hi, I'm Evelyn.
And I'm Robert.
And we're talking about it.
Now, before we get into our next chapter, which is Helm's Deep, we had a question from Discord from one of our Patreon members.
Yes. So on Discord, our Discord access is still only $1 because the pandemic's still going on, and we have a lot of fun over there talking about stuff. Different fans. There is a spoiler channel where I am not on, and it's a lot of fun. And one of our Patreons, Nikita, had a really interesting question, which we answered on Discord, but we thought we would answer it here as well because we thought it was such a great question. And we would love your interpretation of this question as well. Once we get into it, you can always interact with us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. We're trying to be better at social media. Dad's been putting a lot of memes on our Facebook. That's been fun.
Yeah, I mean, they're all Tolkien related. Might not necessarily be
Lord of the Rings, but still Tolkien related.
Yeah, still Tolkien related, yeah.
But anyway, so the question was, do you think that Gimli's worldview has changed now that he's an elf friend?
The answer is yes. Next question, please.
Yeah, that's pretty much how we both felt. Where absolutely, like, seeing the change and the character growth, it's very subtle, but it's there. Like, something that you mentioned, Dad, earlier was, like, the fact that he goes from this very gruff, hardened character who just can't, like, he can't show weakness because that would not be good for his image, and it's like pride and stuff, to where at this point in the story he's able to tell his friends that, and he's friends with these people, right? He's able to like, he's making friends with them, not just allies, and he's able to tell them when he's tired, when he needs a break. And that's something you don't see from dwarves very often.
Right. I think part of it, too, is because the standard dwarf worldview is, at its best, anti-elf.
Yeah, they don't like elves. They really don't.
And kind of vice versa. But
yeah, elves don't like them either. They're like, you can...
Elves don't like them either? Does that mean elves don't like elves?
Elves don't like dwarves. You know what I mean. But like, even back at the Council of Elrond, it was like very obvious that the elves and the dwarves, they really didn't respect each other. They just don't respect each other.
But now that we have a dwarf who has been to Lothlorien
and is like totally in love with Galadriel, he's like, which who wouldn't be? She's gorgeous.
Well, and
awesome.
It's not. I don't think it's just beauty. It's also the inner beauty and the strength.
Yes, absolutely.
I think he really respects her inner strength.
Yes.
For one as well.
For sure. And back in Lothlorien, he and Gimli and Legolas, they just straight up became bros. They were just off at Lothlorien exploring, seeing the elf world, and they were both like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." And the fact that he and Legolas are, they're bros. They're BFFs. They're a bromance going on. And this chapter especially, like, really shows their bromance.
Yeah, so it's not really a spoiler, but this is the chapter where Gimli and Legolas start that competition of how many enemy they've killed.
Right. Which is hilarious. Like, that's something me and my friends would do.
Kill people and keep count?
If we were in that situation, yes.
You heard it here, folks. All right. So let's get on.
So we'll get into the chapter now because we kind of talked about it a little bit. I had some predictions.
Yes, you did.
And even though I had enough time to look back at my predictions, I totally forgot to. So the only one I remember...
Before we continue, I want to say this is the second time in 2 days. We had a problem with our recording equipment yesterday. And we realized that when we were about halfway through our recording. So this is 2 days in a row, knowing that she had a podcast to do, that she forgot to simply look up to see what her predictions were.
So I think I'm going to go ahead and take my dad's advice and start writing them down. So we'll do that at the end of this one. I'll actually write them down. But yes, so the only predictions I remember is first, it's the long-standing prediction that next time we see Frodo and Sam, by the first half of the chapter, we're going to see Gollum. And then the only one that I can remember right now is that I predicted we would not see any hobbits in this chapter. I predicted this would not be a hobbit chapter at all.
Okay.
Um, and I do remember being very confused about Helm's Deep because in my memory, I thought the Helm's Deep fight was in the third movie. So I very vividly remember saying last episode that I really didn't know what was going to happen because in my memory the Helm's Deep was in the third movie. So, and towards like the end, I thought it was the end battle for some reason. So that really shows you like how much I actually remember about any of this.
So this chapter begins.
I do want to say before we start real fast, this was a hard chapter for me.
It's a difficult chapter to read. And it's funny because you said the beginning was hard for you to get through.
Uh-huh.
The last couple of pages was rough for me.
Okay.
Because I lost track of who was saying what about what.
That's fair. Yeah, that's how I felt at the beginning. At the beginning, I had to reread paragraphs to make sure I was understanding it properly and comprehending it properly. And then once like the fighting and the battle started, I was able to follow it better and I was enjoying it. I was really liking those paragraphs and parts. But those beginnings where they're just like, we're writing, there's a person, they're talking, who's talking, we're talking. And it was a lot of back and forth with no names.
Right.
And I had to like really go back and like make sure I knew who was who.
Right. And again, this is token, not writing like you're supposed to write.
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't think it would have bothered me so much if I wasn't going to need to talk about it later.
Okay.
Because it's more, it really sets up what's going on.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who says what because they're all thinking the same thing.
That's fair.
But for us having to report on it in our podcast, it made it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
So for me, for an example, you would say, all right, this gang of people in red shirts and this gang of people in blue shirts had a fight. And then they ran away. Who ran away? Both of them?
Yeah.
Just one of them? That was the kind of feeling I got in some parts of that last.
That's fair, yeah.
Pages. So it begins with the forces of Rohan, Gandalf and company with him, Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn. They take off. They take off on horses immediately.
Yes, they immediately go. They're like, this is a problem. We need to get out and fight this. Let's get it.
Right. So one of the things I want to point out here is it tells us in the book that they rode for 5 hours and went 50 miles.
Yes.
So that is impossible for a normal horse.
So I'm going to say, because of my horse allergy, that's one of the few animals I don't know about. So you're going to have to explain this.
Yes, horses are allergic, Evelyn. But, so going 5 hours and 50 miles in that 5 hours, that's 10 miles an hour. An average horse can only run for 2 miles before it gets absolutely exhausted.
Okay.
Even the Pony Express, where these were ponies that were bred for speed, were only able to sprint, not nearly this far.
Yeah.
And they had rider changing stations.
Yeah, because they would get exhausted.
All on the road. So this kind of lets us know how extraordinary this is.
Yeah.
And that these horses indeed have some type of magic that touches them.
Yes, they're definitely a. The way that I would describe it is they're the elves of horses, where they have more magic in them. They have more higher understanding and comprehension about what their riders want. They have more dexterity. And when we look at the comparison, like you think of Legolas back on the mountain where he's walking and he doesn't even leave any footsteps. Like that's kind of the comparison I'm making with this horse, like these horse breeds, they're more magical,
Right.
and that's part of the world. So like as a biology person who's obsessed with biology, I accept that magic makes it better.
All right, so I'm throwing Evelyn a curveball because we didn't talk about this prior to.
Okay.
So Evelyn and a few of her friends have this obsession
Oh no, I know where this is going.
about centaurs.
Okay, we're not going to get into it.
We're not going to go down that rabbit hole.
But I will. But I just biology majors. We are obsessed with figuring out the biology of mythical creatures, or at least my friends are.
All right, but that's not the question I had.
Okay.
Do you think, because most of y'all's agreement is there has to be some magic involved?
Yeah.
Do you think a centaur could run that fast and that far?
If going off of centaur biology with the dexterity of the human and the horse combined, I would say, in my opinion, if I was creating this magical world with centaurs, that it would probably be similar to the human like dexterity thing where we can walk for a long time and out exhaust our prey, but maybe have some sprinting.
So you keep using the word dexterity. I don't think that word means what you think it means.
No, dexterity, like
Constitution is what you're thinking about.
if you're talking D&D terms, sure.
No, dexterity is how well they do it. Constitution is how long they can do
Okay, yeah. Okay, fine. Lord. Okay.
it. Right. Now, so as we get in, there's also this, some of the criticism that Tolkien gets is that, we always point out about breaking writing rules.
Yes.
But there also criticism about it being so straightforward written. For example, it's really rare for Tolkien to talk about a color other than saying color.
Yeah.
The sky is blue. The field is green.
Mm-hmm.
The birds are black.
Mm-hmm.
And people get on to him about that, about not expressing, what color blue, what color.
Which I will say, as someone who comes from a scientific background and he comes from an academic background, it is like burst into, it's like, don't use flowery language, just use exactly the right words in the smallest amount of time to get your point across as well as you can. Like, don't use flowery language is something I learned in academia, and so him being an academic and not a writer, I can see that he probably had that same kind of thing drummed into him from professors.
Right. But also, do we really want to read that Legolas thought the sunset was burnt umber?
They would make this like even longer.
So with that in mind, I had a paragraph here early on in this chapter I want to read to you, just to give you an idea of the language that he's using.
Mm-hmm.
There were no clouds overhead yet, but a heaviness was in the air. It was hot for the season of the year. The rising sun was hazy, and behind it, following it slowly up the sky, there was a growing darkness. as of a great storm moving out of the east. And away in the northwest there seemed to be another darkness brooding about the feet of the misty mountains, a shadow that crept slowly down from the wizard's veil.
See, when I hear that paragraph, like that is descriptive. I very vividly can see that in my mind's eye about what they're talking about. I feel like if you used more flowery language, it would get annoying. Or at
Right.
least to me.
And now, right after that happens, uh, Gandalf ends up riding beside Legolas
Yes.
and asks Legolas, "What do your eyes see?"
Yes.
Because we have established that Legolas can see far.
Yes.
And Legolas tells Gandalf he sees a darkness ahead. Now, since they rode 50 miles,
Yeah.
and we know it's about 120 miles,
Yeah.
and let's say they've already ridden 10,
Yeah.
that's 60 miles away.
Right.
So, at sea level, you can only see as far as the horizon. And the horizon is 3 miles away if everything is at sea level.
Okay.
And actually, that's why a league is 3 miles. It's from where you are to the next horizon.
Huh. I never knew that.
So these cannot be normal eyes. Now, in order to see 100 miles away, no, I'm sorry. In order to see 59 miles away, you would have to be 2,000 feet up from that point, up above that point.
Okay.
And I mean, we know that they are in rolling hills.
Yeah.
I don't think
That's
necessarily that they're on top of a hill and looking down completely.
yeah.
So his eye, just like the horses, that's a magical thing.
Yeah, it's
That's
definitely magical.
It's magical sight.
Yeah, because
And,
that's not just sight, that's telescopic sight.
and he even says it's a veiling shadow that some power lays upon the land. So he can even tell that it's not a shadow caused by it being overcast
Yeah.
or because the sun's behind the mountains.
It's unnatural.
It's unnatural. And he's able to see all that.
Yeah.
Now, I want to read another
Okay.
just one more thing about again
The way that he uses language
the
to
way
describe
he
things.
uses language, the way he uses language.
Right. Yeah.
The sun went down, blood red in a smoking haze. See, we got blood red instead of just red.
Yeah.
Blood red in a smoking haze. The last spears of the riders were tipped with fire.
See, he even used fire to describe the red.
Right. As the last shafts of light kindled the steep faces of the peaks. Now, very near, they stood on the northernmost arm of the White Mountains. Three jagged horns staring at the sunset. In the last red glow, men in the vanguard saw a black speck, a horseman riding back towards them. They halted, awaiting him, and he came, a weary man with dented helm and cloven shield.
Yeah.
So Tolkien wants us to know that this guy that's coming at them has obviously been in battle.
Right. He's exhausted. There's a dent in his helmet.
He's got a part taken out of his shield.
Yeah.
And so they stop to wait for him.
Yes. And then this also kind of is almost the figurative language where the sun is setting. Red really symbolizes blood.
Well, he even
war.
says blood red.
Yeah, exactly. It's very ominous, and then this rider comes weary from battle. So it really shows us, okay, something is coming.
Right. And Blood Red also kind of predicts what's coming.
Yeah.
And that it's, and I like it where it says a black speck, because when you first read that and you know about the Black Riders,
Yes.
you go,
yeah, I did. I did.
Right. And, but it's not just a speck, it's a black speck.
Yeah.
Or we see something in the distance approaching us. He gets detailed without
overdoing it,
giving away who it is.
Right.
Now, the rider gets there, and he's coming from the area of Helm's Deep,
okay,
where they're fighting the Urukai. And he says, "You've come too late. Saruman's armed the wild hillmen and the herd folk of Dunlin." And he talks about it being in Helm's Deep. So we're being told that not only is it the orcs,
it's like it's other people as well are siding with the side of evil.
right? Now, Helm's Deep. Helm's Deep is a deep cavity, a gorge, really, in the White Mountains, named after the ninth king of the Mark, Helm Hammerhand.
Yep.
And it was here that Hammerhand took refuge when the Rohan was invaded by the Dunlenders.
Yeah.
So this is establishing a little history without giving us a history lesson.
Yes, which was a surprise because Tolkien usually gives us a history lesson.
Right. And then suddenly Gandalf decides he needs to leave the company.
Yeah, he just kind of goes, gotta go.
It's like, await me at Helm's Gate. And he, boom, takes off on Shadowfax. And he's gone.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
What's going on here?
Yeah.
He's just like, uh-oh. He's like that drunk friend that suddenly gets a thought and just wanders off.
No, it's like the cat suddenly waking up from his sleep and doing the zoomies.
True. That too.
Now, according to Tolkien's scheme, Gandalf goes to Isengard at nightfall, talks to Treebeard, for 20 minutes. Can you imagine?
Only 20 minutes?
Exactly. Then rides to help Erkenbrand. Now, some of this is mentioned also in the Unfinished Tales.
Okay.
But, he wrote out a scheme, a timeline. And so this is where...
So we know that that's what's happening.
Yeah, that's where I got those notes from. But as he takes off among the other troops, there's some talking about whether or not
he'll actually show up again.
He'll actually come back.
Because he does that. He just kind of like leaves and pieces out, and they're like, oh, I don't want to make any judgments about him until I get back. And then the other guy is like, you might be waiting a while.
If he comes back.
Yeah. Which is fair. Right. He's a busy dude. He's got a lot to do.
Now, again, there's a lot of mention of places and stuff that we're not told a lot of the history here.
Yeah.
But the history is told in other Tolkien works.
Right. Tolkien knows exactly what everything is.
Right. So
I just had a thought.
Oh, another one?
Yeah. What if this is actually an alternate dimension that Tolkien actually is originally from, and he came here and wrote about it?
Okay.
Because of how detailed this history is, what if?
All right, so I'm getting ready to go down a rabbit hole.
Oh, no.
So my wife and I, a couple of nights ago, watched the new Godzilla vs. Kong movie.
Okay.
And okay,
What did I start?
spoiler alert. I am going to talk about an important plot point in Godzilla King Kong. There's a theory called the Inter Earth.
Okay.
And when they get to Inter Earth, your mom says it's Middle Earth
Okay.
because it's it's mountains, and I mean it's kind of cool looking,
Okay.
and that's just the first thing your mom thought of when she saw it. Okay,
Okay.
that wasn't too much of a rabbit hole, was it?
No. But yeah, like what if he's like it's so detailed with history. It's like how do we know he didn't just come from that world and decided to just write about it
Now there's
as a historian?
now there's a series of books. The first one is called There Be Dragons Here.
Yes, I'm familiar.
I can't remember who wrote it offhand. We'll find it and put it in the notes.
Yes.
But the book is based on those English writers, those contemporary English writers. Tolkien, C.S.S. Lewis, Barry. And they have gone to this other world, and this is where they've gotten all their ideas for their books.
It's kind of like Ink Spell, where the books actually are a different universe, and there's people with powers that can speak them into different realities.
Or if you want a really fun, interesting, and weird read, the whole Tuesday Next series of books by Jasper Forde, which is spelled Forde, about each book is its own little universe and how the characters are alive in those books, but all we ever see of the books are what they have allowed to be written about their history.
Ah, okay.
It's a lot. He's got that strange sense of humor.
Okay.
Uh, but it's a lot of fun. He's the one that wrote The Fourth Bear.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
which is fun, which is a different take on the uh, Goldilocks story.
Yeah.
But it's written for adults
Yes.
because there is some sex and violence in it. But then we get now back to our regularly scheduled program. Hornburg, we hear about Hornburg,
Uh-huh.
and it's a fortress at the mouth of Helm's Deep.
Yes.
Called Hornburg because Helm's great horn can still be heard in and around there.
Okay.
A legend has it that Hornburg was built by giants.
Okay.
And so this report from the scouts also tell us that there are wolf riders, orcs, and wild men heading south toward Helm's Deep.
Yes.
So they've got this host of an army
Yeah.
really coming. And they ask him, has any signs of Gandalf been seen? He says, yes, we have seen the White Rider going hither and thither. Now, hither and thither means here and there.
Yeah.
But growing up in the South, being a military brat, when you said hither and thither, it was not meant as something positive. It was like he's going hither and thither, like he's looking for something that can't be found, or he's looking for something, but he doesn't know what it is.
Right.
So it's not a purposeful going here from there, and that's how I read it. Now I know because I know enough about Tolkien that
it might have meant something different in his time.
right, like hither and thither here makes it seem more important instead of
Okay.
less important.
Right, where he's just like going over here and go over. He's definitely like playing behind the scenes, like manipulating it. He is don't look behind the curtain. I know where the man behind the curtain.
Right. And then at this point, Aragon and Legolas, they go with Eoman, which is one of the Rohan riders,
Uh-huh.
uh, and take up the vanguard.
Yes.
It's interesting that as much as Tolkien writes, he uses the nickname for vanguard, which is just Van. So it says, you know, Aragon, Legolas, Eoman, and company went in a van toward so and so.
It is a funny image.
Yeah, so that's a big ass van. Vanguard is a foremost unit of an advancing force.
Yes.
So they're heading up there first. And the enemy around them is lighting everything that can burn.
Yes.
The fields, the houses,
Yeah.
everything that they can find, they burn it. And as they go up, they find Erkenbrand, and he has many men to hold Helm's gate. But within Erkenbrand, there seems to be no hope within him himself.
Because there's a lot that's coming at him.
But there's a little bit of fighting. And then during a small reprieve, Gimli and Legolas were together in part of this.
Uh-huh.
And Gimli, leaning against the breastworks, this says, "This is more to my liking." Now, what's more to his liking? One, that they're up in the hill, up in the mountains. Two, he's getting to cleave heads. You know?
Yes.
And he even says,
yes to both.
right, and he even says, this country has tough bones. I mean, because of the deep mountain rock.
Yeah.
And then opposite, Legolas just doesn't like the place.
Yeah.
It feels eerie and weary to him.
Yeah.
And as they're suddenly, there are battle cries, and the rear guard is driven in. And to give you an idea of what's going on, Tolkien writes, arrows, thick as the rain, came whistling over the battlements and fell clinking and glancing on the stones. Some found a mark. The assault on Helm's Deep had begun, but no sound or challenge was heard within. No answering arrows came. So here they are taking refuge in this place.
Yeah.
And they're being attacked, but they really haven't gone on the defense here.
Yeah.
And they the orcs bring out a battering ram. And eventually they get to be ran away.
Right.
Gimli was ready to defend the return of those when they come back for the second wave.
Yeah.
But here begins the competition between Gimli and Legolas.
I love it.
I do too.
Because like there's like a point, there's this imagery where it says where some of the battlements are, or not battlements, some of the soldiers are getting just destroyed by arcs, and then a small shadowy figure comes out and just cleaves their heads right off. And at first I was like, what is happening? And then it made it clear it was Gimli, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
Right.
He's just like there in the darkness, just like going from orc to orc, just like, I got you, let's get it.
And so Gimli calls for Legolas to come help. And when they have another reprieve, Gimli says 21, and Legolas says half a dozen.
Yeah.
Which is 24.
No, 2 dozen. Half a dozen is 6.
I completely said that wrong. We're going to do that
No,
again.
that would have been
And Gimli says, "Come join me." And then when they have a small reprieve,
funny. Yeah.
Gimli says, "I have 21." And Legolas says, "I have 24."
Which is 24.
Yeah.
And oh my God, I laughed. I did. I laughed at that part. I thought that was hilarious.
And Saruman brings up 500-year-old hate of these wild men and these Denlanders.
Yeah.
I mean, they've hated the Rohan 500 years. I don't understand how people can hate.
It's a generational thing. They teach their children, and their children keep it up.
But then we have an explosion.
Yes.
An explosion.
Yeah.
So Saruman is starting to play with modern warfare weapons.
Yeah.
Gunpowder and the like. And then everyone gets called back to the wall.
Okay.
There's a blast of fire. Again, Saruman is playing with modern weapons.
Right. He has this. He's able to use this like gunfire type weapons. It's very rudimentary, but he has the gunpowder and he has this explosive material that I think probably is like the way I read it was a very much a surprise to these other people, to the Rohan and everyone.
Right. And then at one point, Aragon gets up above the gates. And he's got a pair of brass balls on him.
Yeah.
He asks the Uruk-hai if they're ready to surrender. Now, let's parley. He invites them to surrender.
That's like we just watched Thor last night, and at the very beginning when he's fighting like that big guy, and he just kind of walks up to him and goes, "I accept your surrender." I mean, just the cheek on it.
Yeah, so it's like Aragon rolling a natural 20 on a charisma save.
Yeah.
Because while they don't surrender,
They kind of pause for a second.
They're enthralled.
Yeah, they're like,
and they have pause.
Yeah.
And they basically pause long enough for some things to get done behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And eventually they're able to crack open the gates.
Yeah.
But what we hear going on now is that now we hear some fear from the attacking force.
Yes.
They see the White Rider coming with 1,000 men.
Here comes Gandalf with reinforcements.
It's the cavalry to the rescue. And there's a hint that there are treants
around, yeah.
Around. They don't actually tell us there's treants around, but there's this,
like we know.
There's this forest which seems to have moved into the area, and anyone who goes into that forest don't come out.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And then chapter ends.
Yeah. It was I did want to go into the next chapter. It was very hard for me to stop.
Right. So what were your first impressions after you finished reading it? And by the way, just let everyone know, I usually take so long to read each chapter because I'm taking these notes about things I know from other sources and so forth.
Right. And I'm reading the chapter, truly never reading this before, and just experiencing it for the first time.
Right. So this is the first time Evelyn was finished after I was.
Yes.
Reading and taking notes. Because we usually sit down about the same time to reread and take notes shortly before we record.
Right. And
so it's all fresh in our head.
Right. So you read it rather quickly and then do a lot of notes, and I kind of take my time. But No, I was much longer than you.
That's what I said. This time you were.
Oh yeah, I usually finish before.
Usually finish before
but
me,
I
but
was
this time.
I was almost like a half hour after.
Yeah.
Because I kept having to reread those beginning parts. So I was really the beginning parts I kind of felt, oh Lord, here we go. It's just gonna be a chapter about traveling. Like that's kind of how I felt. Was it was gonna be just a chapter about traveling. And it was kind of like, oh no, there's so many people talking. I'm trying to keep it straight. But when the fighting started with the action, I thought it was very well written. I was able to follow it very well. I really enjoyed it. There was like some humor there. And I ended up enjoying the rest of the chapter. And at the end, I wanted to know what happened next.
Right. Yeah. So, we were talking about how he doesn't write in the conventional way
Yeah.
of the writers of the time.
Or anytime.
But yet, he wrote it in such a way that it was a page turner.
Yes.
And that you want to continue.
Yes, for sure.
Even though you're like, okay, wait a minute, who did that? Go back and forth. And one of the things I didn't really talk much about, because I didn't want to spoil a lot, are some other things going on which are interesting.
Okay.
For those who haven't read it yet, I don't want to spoil.
Yeah,
I don't want to spoil these little things.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, it was really, I liked the fighting. I liked the fight scene.
Right.
I thought it was a very well written action story.
Yes. Now, what are your predictions? What are your predictions for the next chapter?
So the next chapter is called Road to Isengard. And okay, so from the hints of seeing the Ents like towards the end where it's kind of like hinting that it's there, I am going to predict that the company of Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn are going to be reunited with Merry and Pippin within this next chapter. I'm going to predict that based on context clues.
Okay.
I'm going to predict that I don't know if I can get away with this. Can I say it's not going to be Sam and Frodo? I mean, I feel like that's a cop out.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a cop out.
That doesn't count towards your 3.
Yeah, okay. But I do think that they're not going to show up because I feel that the Merry and I'll just make it part of that one. That Frodo and Sam are not going to show up, but Merry and Pippin are going to show up based on the context clues.
Sounds good.
With Isengard, I think Saruman's going to be in this chapter. Can I get away with that because it's going to be in Isengard?
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Because you're particularly picking this chapter. Yep.
Yes, for this particular chapter, I believe that Saruman is going to show up in this chapter, and
well, action-wise, what do you think might be happening action-wise?
I mean, am I allowed...
Or non-action?
I mean, am I allowed to predict there's another battle going on? Can I predict that the Ents are going to join in on the fighting?
Sure.
Okay. Those are my 3.
That sounds good. So, just to wrap it all up, this was a more compelling chapter to read.
Once you got past the first few pages.
Well, see, for me, it wasn't the past.
Oh, for me it was.
For me, it wasn't the past few pages. It was the last few pages.
Okay.
Who did that? What?
Yeah.
So, but it was very enjoyable to read. And it's really getting into, as you said, some action and so forth. It's no longer a lot of walking and talking.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Alrighty. Well, I've been Robert.
And I've been Evelyn.
And you've been listening to Token About It. Thank you so much for listening. I have been Robert.
And I have been Evelyn.
Podcasters are Robert and Evelyn Lewis.
Edited by Evelyn Lewis.
Produced by Robert Lewis, Evelyn Lewis,
Nikita,
Regina, and Comic Canary.
Music provided by Ben Sound. Link in the description.
Support us on Patreon at Token About It Podcast.
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Tolkien About It.
And Twitter at Token Pod.
Thank you all again for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.